Happy Monday, everyone. Welcome to the Media Row podcast with me, Justin Miller, sponsored, of course, by Kelly's Little Nipper and Stevens Automotive and Sales. Happy to have you guys here. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope you are getting geared up and ready for July 4th. And I know Megan and I are, which, of course, no show on Friday, no show that following Monday with us traveling back from Missouri, but we're excited. Going to be a great show today and on Wednesday to wrap up this short holiday week. Today's show is really special because, one, I like getting outside my comfort zone. And while this show is 99.999% of the time going to be about sports or Drake or Missouri Valley Conference, any of that, I do enjoy getting out of my comfort zone and trying something else and talking about things that interest me and that are important to me. And also, again, finding people that inspire me that are even outside of the sports media world. And today's show is a guest that I've been trying to get on the show, I think, since March. So it's been months. I've hounded this man on Instagram. And so very fortunate to have him on. The guest today is Pete McBride, who is a photographer for National Geographic, has made countless documentaries, has been nominated for Emmy Awards. He is the real deal. And I got into Pete McBride because of his documentary Into the Canyon, which you can watch now on Disney+. And it follows him and his National Geographic writer buddy, Kevin Fedarko, as they try to complete a through hike of the Grand Canyon, over 700 miles of going rim to rim, which is insane because more people have stepped on the face of the moon than have done a complete through hike of the Grand Canyon. And in that documentary, he does a fantastic job of just describing, all the craziness that they're going through and the hike itself. He goes and speaks with people involved with trying to stop people from building on the canyon, from trying to mine in the canyon, and people from the Navajo reservation that are directly affected by it. It's a fantastic documentary. Go check it out. I saw it when I was in high school and immediately was glued. Followed Pete on every social media platform. I remember when my dad and I went to Colorado in the summer I graduated high school. I found the National Geographic magazine that was their canyon walk and the cover of it, and so grabbed that. I'm obsessed with that documentary. So right away, wanted to get Pete McBride on to just really talk about his career, but it's perfect timing because something that I hold close and dear to my heart is our public lands, is our national parks. I've always been in a family that is, you respect all of that. You respect everything around you. And there's some threats to our public lands, to our national parks. And he's been very outspoken, Pete McBride, against the selling of public lands and the defunding of our national park and cutting staff at our national parks. So I'm really excited to hear his takes on that as well. And I hope you really enjoy this show. Make sure to follow Pete McBride. We'll put all of his socials up at the end of the show and see all of his great work. And I hope you really enjoy this newer and different feel of the Media Row podcast. Before we get started on the interview, though, need to give a shout out to Kelly's Little Nipper at 1701 East Grand Avenue in Des Moines. Kelly's Little Nipper historical site. Still, my phone, I should start just taking screenshots and posting it, or at least sending it to Jeff at Kelly's, because it's awesome to see. I feel like every Sunday I wake up to messages about people that went out Friday and Saturday night for the first time, or taking people for the first time to Kelly's Little Nipper because of listening to the show, which we greatly appreciate. But if you still haven't been, plenty of time and plenty of great opportunities to go over to Kelly's Little Nipper. Trivia on Wednesdays. You have live music on the weekends. It is a perfect spot. Great food, great drinks, and even better community over at 1701 East Grand Avenue in Des Moines. Kelly's Little Nipper, proud sponsor of the Media Row podcast. When you go to Kelly's Little Nipper, make sure to let them know that Media Row sent you. So, Pete, again, thank you so much for doing this for me. I know you're all over the place. You just pulled over your car for me so you'd be able to do this. Because we were gonna try to do just audio, and you're able to make this work, and I just really appreciate it. So thank you, sir, so much for doing this.
No problem. Justin, happy to help, buddy. I'm just getting sorted. That's why I'm fixing my hat and shades and in a
Making sure
funky
you look
spot.
good.
We don't care about that. We're past that part of life.
So
Um,
I wanted to get you on to talk career. I got into you with the Into the Canyon documentary, which I know you're still going around doing talks about that, right? Going into different places and talking about that documentary still, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Anyway, I appreciate you reaching out. I'll just give your audience a background, quick background. I have worked as a photographer and filmmaker. I do some writing too. I do books, but I've been doing that for about 30 years. Big chunk of it for National Geographic. I've worked at Smithsonian, outside, bunch of different commercial clients. And I used to do a lot of expeditions. I did stories from telling them who builds the route on Mount Everest and talk about the Sherpa. I took a kayak down the coast of Antarctica. I've walked big chunks of the Amazon River, and then I started focusing in on my backyard, and I did a project following my backyard river. I grew up in Colorado, and so I started following the Colorado River source to sea. And I still do that because it's an ongoing issue. And then in the midst of that, I ended up doing a little walk in the park, which is what we refer to, which was ended up being an 800-mile walk from tip to tail, east to west, through the length of the Grand Canyon, below the rim, between the river and the rims. We're not talking rim to rim. We're talking the entire length of the canyon. And at the time, more people had stood on the surface of the moon than had actually done that. So that was a thirsty affair. We had to find water every day, but it was a way to talk about how important our national parks are and public lands. They've been in the news right up to yesterday to today. We can dive into that. And so I do, there's less magazine work these days, but I still do documentary filmmaking and I do a lot of speaking for corporate clients. So I just came back giving the keynote talk at a mutual fund um, conference, which was really interesting. So trying to remind that the finance bros and financial experts in the world remember the importance of um, protecting our wild spaces, our shared spaces, not just for us, but wildlife and so forth. Are
Yeah,
we good on the vertical? Or you want me to go sideways? Doesn't matter to me.
no, it works perfectly. I
Okay,
appreciate it.
cool.
You're the photographer. You tell me what I should be doing,
Well,
actually.
no, I don't know the format of your podcast visuals, so
No,
the
this will,
sound sounds good, so we're good there.
yeah, no, this will be great. Did you ever see when you were walking with Kevin in the Grand Canyon, did you ever see it ever turning into where you would be talking with the finance bros? You'd be doing those corporate keynote speaking. Did that ever cross your mind?
Did it as I was licking rocks trying to get water and pulling cactus out of my legs. Did I ever think I'd be speaking on the stage of the World Economic Forum and the TED stage? And um, no, hell no. I knew we had, if we could finish, we had a story, and I believe, um, especially for your generation, people forget the importance of story. Uh, Valuable to have an important story that's not just about, hey, look at the beautiful image I made, or um, look at this awesome, or selfie of me in this cool place. It's about, what's the point? What's the story behind it? Is there, a narrative arc, a beginning and a middle and an end? So I knew there was a story there because we were doing a very, very complicated, hard mission, which on its own right was a story, but there were so many stories we are trying to tell around it. What's the story of the Native American tribal community? There's 11 tribes that live around the Grand Canyon. They actually used to live inside the Grand Canyon. So when we made national parks, these parks weren't technically empty. We like to often think they were, but there were people living in them. And so there's the story of that and how they are finding their way to work with the park, find economic stability, how they're sustaining their traditions, their heritage, their archaeology inside the park and other places, how things are changing with water. And not all tribes they're not monolithic, as we say. They don't have one view. They're like us. They're human beings. They have different views, and each tribe has a different perspective. And so it's just important to bring their voice back to the table. So that was part of the story. I didn't see how important that would be. I just finished a documentary about a young Havasupai woman who's 19 now. She introduced a new national monument 2 years ago around the Grand Canyon National Park to prevent future uranium claims. She worked with her mother. They worked with 13 tribes. Uh, she introduced the President of the United States at the time. Pretty amazing since she'd never spoken in front of a live audience when she had got up and had to introduce on a stage that big. Um, so that was cool. That I never would have seen that happening. Um, I've seen a lot of how single individuals make a difference. People often ask, well, if we care about a place, what can we do to change it in today's world?
Yeah.
And it's often overwhelming, the climate and politics, even depends where you are. It doesn't even matter. There are issues that are blue and red that are hard to navigate in today's world, especially in conservation. And I've seen firsthand that people, particularly in the native community, single voices can just get up every day and keep pushing for what they believe in and protecting for the next generation. And they make big changes. This one particular Navajo woman that we followed in the story of that film Into the Canyon, she helped almost single-handedly, not entirely single-handedly, but she led the charge prevent $1 billion development.
Yeah, the
Um,
tram, right?
the
That was
tram.
gonna go
Yep, yep,
down. Yeah.
yep.
And so that got completely taken, like that's no longer in progress, right? Because after the
Well,
documentary it stopped, or what is that on now?
it stopped, but in the world of conservation, we often say that you only have to lose once. So it was probably put on the shelf for now. It'll probably, you never know, it might get woken up at some point. But yes, for now, we will not see a gondola inside or to the border of the Grand Canyon National Park at the moment. And
Yeah,
that may not just real quick, that may not seem like a big deal, but it's symbolic of all our parks and how we as each generation wants to see these places and how it takes each generation to kind of stand up for them. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you though.
no worries at all. I was just gonna say, Kevin, I heard on a podcast, the Dirtbag Diaries. You guys did that one not too long ago. Was
Yep.
listening to that, and Kevin had a great line where he's like, "Yeah, some of these things they stop it, but it's almost a curse of, well, now that idea is up in the air. So
Yeah.
that gondola, yeah, it's shelved for now, but what's the next idea that they're gonna come up with? So just for younger people like me, how do you try to stay ahead of that? How do you try to stay ahead of the next idea to make sure these places are preserved?
I think doing what you're doing right now, talking to people, getting your voice out there, letting people know that you care about it. You want your future you want to be able to maybe see a Grand Canyon like I saw it. And maybe you want, the next kid that comes through Drake, or wherever can do the same thing as well. It's important to leave some of these places as they are, is kind of the famous saying. And it takes storytelling to do that. It takes each generation to kind of become aware of it and talk about it. So conversation is a great start. And um, make yourself aware, listen to the news, be, be, be present in what's happening. There's been a lot in the news as of late around national parks and public lands. We could dive into that a little bit if you want. Um, and yeah, I think being engaged and making a stand,
Yeah.
being informed and not afraid to like stand up for something you believe in.
Before we do get into, because I really do want to hear more about the national parks, about what we're seeing in the news right now. But you're a person that you're always telling other people's story. So one of the reasons I also wanted to get you on was I wanted to hear your story of because you're someone that, like I said, when we're just meeting each other in high school, I was writing a paper and that documentary is now like a summer. I'm always watching it in the summer, the Into the Canyon. So just how do you go from being a Colorado kid to then snapping these amazing photos and telling amazing stories for place like National Geographic?
Uh, Persistence and hard work. Uh, there's a lot of it's a very challenging and competitive career space, but I started out as a newspaper writer, and then started picking up my camera, and the editors liked my pictures probably more than my words at the time. But I started out, I was really an athlete, so I was in the sports world like you've been. I was an ice hockey player. I played Division 1 hockey, and I was a Division 1 ski racer. So sports were my world. And I think that gave me some discipline to once I became interested in telling stories, kind of be stay with it and work hard, and perseverance and all the things you learn from sports translates to doing what I do to a degree, putting on a pack every day and getting out there, getting up early. There's one person once told me you don't have no's, you have speed bumps or roadblocks. You just got to find a way to go around them. So I've spent better part of 2 decades going around a lot of roadblocks trying to tell stories. And
You, or sorry.
go ahead, go ahead.
No, so you talk about those speed bumps. What were some of the early speed bumps of trying to get into National Geographic and start telling these stories? What were some of the early ones and how did you overcome them?
Uh, the first one I did a story early on flying a World War I biplane. A guy was an aviation enthusiast, and we flew this. He planned to fly this biplane from London to Cape Town, reenacting the first time a plane ever went through the African continent. And I met him and got on kind of on board as a young photographer, and I wanted to go being in an expedition guy, and I kind of earned my seat there. And we went to National Geographic, and they said no, and I was like, well, that sucks. But in hindsight, that was a benefit because they didn't know who I was, and they wouldn't have let me have that opportunity. I had to prove myself. Um, so we ended up doing the story. It's a much longer story, but we had to get fundraising and do all that. I did a small share of it. But we flew this plane that goes at top speed of 65 miles an hour from London to Cape Town. It took 58 days. We crashed once. We reenacted the people who did it in 1920. They did it in 43 days. They crashed twice. But I stayed focused and very, very committed to visually telling the story. I took the best pictures I could with the almost no budget. I begged and borrowed and pleaded for other people, pilots, to take me up to get aerial pictures of this plane in front of amazing landscapes like the pyramids of Giza in Egypt or Victoria Falls and the Zambezi River on the border of Zimbabwe, things like that. And because I kept doing that and kept day by day, step by step, I had enough photos that I went back to National Geographic, and they, to my surprise and my gratitude later, they said yes, and they bought the story, and then that kind of opened the door, and then uh they say you're only as good as your last photo, only as good as your last story. There's no easy street in this game. You got to keep producing, but if you like doing it and you like telling stories and you tell stories that are close to your heart and maybe your home or wherever, usually shows. The cliche, follow your heart and the money will follow. I think there's some truth to that. So do
So
what you
the
like.
this wasn't on my list of questions, but you guys crashed once. Like, is that just part of being in the field you are? Are National Geographic people just built different where you crash once and you're like, all right, let's go back up? Because anyone else you crash and you're like, I'm out. I'm done. What's
No,
that
I mean,
story?
I think it thankfully wasn't that bad of a crash. We hit a wing tip on a landing in the middle of southern Kenya. We had to rebuild the wing in the middle of nowhere, grass. It wasn't even a runway. It was in the middle of the savannah. There were lions. We stayed with this guy, a local guy down there who was a pretty famous guy, and he gave me a gun. He's like, just make sure you got a rifle with you. There are lions in the area, and so
How old are you
um,
at this time? Sorry.
I'm 28, so it was
Oh,
yeah,
dude.
it was crazy. It was crazy. But there were plenty of days. Don't get me wrong. There were plenty of days where I'm like, this is absolutely crazy. What am I doing? I should get out of this gig. But I stuck with it, and I think that's probably the biggest lesson I've learned is, having patience, sticking with things you believe in, working hard. There's no like you work hard one day and it's a vacation for the rest after that. It's work hard every day for me.
Who were some of the early like mentors for you that really helped you kind of find your way of telling stories and help you get your foot in the door? Were there anyone at Nat Geo or other places that really helped you?
Uh, this gentleman who owned this biplane was super helpful because he'd already done a story with National Geographic. His name's Peter McMillan. He's great. And then some of the other photographers at Nat Geo, some were incredibly helpful. A guy named Joel Satori, who's a great photographer. He does endangered species around the world, the last species on the planet. He's been trying to document all of them. He was very helpful. I got the great opportunity to meet a famous photographer named Sebastian Salgado, a Brazilian photographer who didn't pick up a camera till he was 38. He's one of my favorite photographers, and he just passed away. And
Oh.
for your listeners, you should look him up because he did some of the most beautiful black and white work of very, very challenging human condition stories, starvation, giant human gold mines in Brazil, um, famine, and he did it in such a beautiful way that it opened my eyes to what photography could be. It made me emotionally connect to the image.
And
Um,
you've had some really incredible stories, though, yourself that you've been involved with. I mean, the Mount Everest one, of course, Into the Canyon. Is there a story or people from your stories that you'll always look back on as kind of a top moment? Maybe like I've made it kind of moment?
I don't know if I'll ever have I made it a moment, but I've had some moments where I've just gotten to meet and feel like I have a level of camaraderie or shared experience with some people I really deeply respect and admire. Kevin Fidarko is one. He's a longtime friend, and he wrote a book about our walk through the Grand Canyon called A Walk in the Park, and it became a New York Times bestseller. He's out there pushing it now. It's a good read. Makes fun of me drastically. Um, but just to be able to call him up and get his advice is great. A lot of my colleagues at National Geographic the same. And so uh, another thing that I think is important is storytelling or pretty much anything in life, in my opinion, is a team sport. It's always better with a team. Um, Work with people. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to get advice. That's one of the greatest things you can kind of collaboration is one of the greatest things. It's the greatest things for finding differences in today's divided world with politics. It's one of the greatest ways of working on hard stories. And so I would say collaboration has always been one of my things I've been most grateful for.
I do want to talk about you and Kevin's relationship because that was a thing. I mean, right away in the documentary and in through Kevin's writing, like there is a special connection you guys have. And I'm shocked Kevin still answers your phone calls. I mean, because you can tell our listeners about. So the Everest, that one didn't go as planned, trying to cover the Sherpas, right? Was it an
Yeah.
avalanche? Is that what you guys got caught up in, or
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
the
So
story?
Kevin's like an older brother, older and wiser. He's a two-time New York Times bestselling author. He writes books. And he worked at Outside Magazine and a bunch of others, National Geographic. But we teamed up early on just by coincidence, and so we did a bunch of different stories. One was on Everest. We got caught in an avalanche. We survived, but scared the crap out of us. We went to the Arctic to document the caribou migration, the largest migration of species in the North American continent. How many caribou did we see? Zero. Um, Bad luck, bad timing. Maybe it was our dynamic. Who knows? We went and did a story on documenting the narcotic trade in the country of Djibouti, which is north of Somalia. It's the only country in Africa which has a military base. Um, that went sideways and we got deported. Very scary. I think I have an ulcer from that one. Then I dragged Kevin basically literally to a degree through the Grand Canyon, although he definitely walked himself the whole way. But he's a little bit more like Eeyore and I'm a little more outgoing. So we make fun of each other, but he still picks up the phone gratefully because I think we both respect our differences and realize that there's strength in teamwork.
Yeah, and just those connections, are those pretty rare for this, like working at National Geographic, to have a connection that close, or is it more common than people think?
I think it happens quite a bit, but it usually happens over time. And we live in a slightly different world. There's less assignments these days, less magazines. So maybe it's a little harder now, but I definitely know that once you find somebody you can work with and get along with, nurture that relationship, pursue it, and don't throw it away. Shared experiences are important.
And it's been interesting because you have all these different stories, you've had all these different experiences. Reflecting back on being a young photographer, trying to get your story out there with the plane and, Nat Geo saying no, and then being an experienced photographer and storyteller, trying to get funding and go do the Into the Canyon documentary. What are similarities and differences between being a young writer with no name, trying to pitch a story, and then being someone who has a name and has this resume and trying to create a story as well? Are there similarities, differences, same nerves when you go up to your boss to ask for funding? Kind of what's that process like?
I think it's the same. It's very similar. You have to do your homework, you got to do your research, and you have to have confidence in what you're doing, humility, and do your best. It doesn't, like I said earlier, it doesn't get easier. It helps if you have a proven track record,
Mhm.
but sometimes, they want the up and comer. And so you could easily look at, you know, us old folks or middle-aged folks who've been pushed down the road already. But I think just know that whatever you're going to do, it's important to believe in the story and keep pushing. And if you get a no, well, figure out why. Can you improve on the proposal or whatever the idea is? Can you come back? Can you go around the roadblock? Can you go over the speed bump and redo it or go somewhere else? Plenty of times I've gone to other publications or other outlets or turned stories into books that were supposed to be magazine stories. So a lot of options out there, and I think it's being confident and optimistic and just believing in yourself too.
One more just like personal career question, and then I do want to get into national park conversation. But with your, line of work and doing all these different stories, is there what's your favorite animal, favorite kind of story? What's your favorite thing to photograph? Like what's your favorite thing to go after?
I like I mean, I love going after remote places and trying to get unique images or stories that haven't been published, haven't been told. I like those stories, stories that I believe should be told but aren't being told. Rivers running out of water, for instance, the
Hmm.
Colorado River that created the Grand Canyon doesn't reach the ocean anymore. It did when I was your age. It doesn't now. That's a
Yeah.
big story, in my opinion. Rivers generally, historically, for millions of years, ran to the sea, and they're kind of like the arteries. So, um, those big stories are important. Wildlife is very hard. Um, and you can bang your head against the door a lot because you can come up with nothing. I'm doing one right now around wolves, and they're very elusive and hard. But when you get an image, it's rewarding, and you learn about the subject as you go. So that part's great too. Less so about human conflict. I used to do a bit of that, and I'm less scared of wildlife than I am of human beings. I find human beings to be less predictable sometimes than wildlife.
What's your next story that you're wanting to tell? Was there a place that maybe when you were my age that you were obsessed with? Because like my dad gave me Edward Abbey's Desert Solitaire when I was a kid.
Yeah, yeah.
Read that thing in like 2 days, and the Southwest has always been a bucket list. I want to go see it. Was there something like that for you as a kid, that is still you haven't gotten to be able to go see or tell the full story of?
Well, side note, I read Desert Solitaire when I was in college. Felt the same way, but I grew up near that part of the world. A lot of the
Hmm.
opening is in Arches National Park, and I
Yeah.
had been there as a kid, so I felt I'd already been lucky to go there. I also read, now I can't think of the title, of course. Uh, what is the title? I read a book about Peter Matheson's Snow Leopard. Um,
Okay.
and it's always been a dream to get to the Himalaya. I've been to the Himalaya and I've done big projects in Bhutan and Nepal and around Mount Everest and the headwaters of the Ganges River in India. But I've always wanted to go see a snow leopard, and that would be a big, big dream of mine. But very, very hard. They're very few of them, very elusive. They live up high. You really got to know your stuff and you got to get lucky. But who knows? One day.
I do want, because I don't want to take too much of your time. I want to get into the public lands, kind of just what our world is facing right now, and just maybe for the audience who hasn't been up to date as much as you have, kind of just what is happening right now with the public land sale. I saw on Instagram earlier today there was a good victory for not wanting to sell public land. Just kind of dive in for the audience of what's
Sure.
happening as of today.
So there's been a bill that the current president Trump has been pushing forward, the big beautiful bill, and in that was a small, you know, portion of it involved selling off 3.3 million acres of public land, which was the argument was that we need more housing, uh, which yes, there's a housing challenge for your age and most ages in this country, but there was no specification of affordability of this housing. There was no information about exactly where in this public land. Most of it was in the West. How they would do with fire mitigation, which has become a big challenge as it's gotten hotter and drier. We have a lot more wildfire as a changing climate, and the the saying is, you may not. There are those that don't care about climate change, but climate change doesn't care about us. It's happening. I've seen it on the front lines over and over. Um, the other thing, though, is which I think is so powerful to see and so important about this for your viewers to understand is that public lands throughout the West, and there's parts in the bill that were in Maine as well, is that these are not blue or red issues. These are places where we can go experience, understand, learn about nature, have experiences with each other, with our friends, with our family. Um, they're incredibly powerful, or a way to go test ourselves. Can you spend the night out by yourself? Can you actually see the Milky Way? Many never get to see that unless you go to public lands in the middle of nowhere. Can you understand a watershed? Can you see wildlife that you've never seen? Can you be touched and moved and inspired by nature, which is really important to protect nature in the future? But you need to have that experience. And it doesn't need to be that, doesn't have to be the Grand Canyon. It could be just public lands in your backyard. It could even be a park in a city, to be, in my opinion. Anyway, these came up for sale, and hundreds of thousand people, blue and red, across the spectrum, um, politically, said, no, no, wait, wait, this is not right. We all like public lands and we all like our national parks. They pushed back, and so then they tweaked it in the bill, and then they said, oh, no, not 3.3 million acres. We're going to do 1.2. And then everyone said, no, no, we already said blue and red states, hunters, fishermen, outdoorsmen, recreationists, old, young, across the spectrum said, no, we don't want any. This is our legacy as Americans. And so just now, today, was kind of announced that they cut that out. It was led by a senator in Utah. Nobody understands kind of what was the agenda there, but the 1.28 million acres of public lands was removed. So that's a victory on that front. Um, there may be other things in the bill that could be for further discussion on a political front, but I think um, for me, what I think is so important, and I go and talk to audiences of all stripes and colors and remind them that, putting conservation back into the Conservative Party is important because that's where it started, actually. Um, and just how important these places are. And on the national parks front, I've been very privileged to travel all over the world, and there's no park system like we have in this country. Um, and it is one of the greatest legacies we have, and it is not blue or red or any political stripe. It should be funded. The funding keeps getting cut. It should be something we celebrate and we all kind of connect over and feel grateful that we have it. And um, so I think it'll take each generation kind of to get reminded and reflect on that, the value of it, not just for ourselves, but all the wild species that rely on it. And of course, our watershed, all our drinking water comes from most of these places, the rivers and water table that kind of starts in a lot of these national parks. So it's good news on that front, but it's an ongoing challenge and battle, and good to get engaged and good to be involved with it because in the world of conservation, like I said earlier, you only need to lose once and then it's gone for good.
And
Um,
yeah, with the current administration, really being all for trying to defund the national parks, cut staffing with the parks, sell off public lands, just how do you cope with this? And what are the steps to try to prevent this? I know we talk about having a conversation is a great start, but then what's the next step?
yeah, to me, I don't understand it. I think we need to get more people in our parks and, in ways that don't have huge impacts, control the impact. But um, I think probably it'd be good if the current administration went and visited some of our national parks, as much as I do the golf course. That's just me, but I don't, I believe parks are for everybody. So how do we get people to make a difference? First is, yes, getting engagement, having conversations. I think what turned around this current public land sale was public engagement through podcasts, social media, writing letters, contacting your representatives. It may not seem like those make a difference, but when they add up and you get 500,000 letters at one senator's office, it makes a statement. It makes waves. Um, and so that takes kind of consistent doing, but I think that's really important. And take your friends to it, take your family, have experiences there, reconnect with the wonder and the awe of these places and be like, look how great this is. This is why we got to protect these places. These are awesome. Look how amazing it is to see a night sky without light pollution. Like, oh my God. Or hear wildlife you've never heard in your life. I mean, I woke up in the Grand Canyon to the sound of bat wings, something I never even thought of. And it became my regular alarm clock. I followed lion tracks as my route finding through the Grand Canyon because they go the easiest and most energy efficient way. Never thought I'd be doing that. I often wondered who was following who, but I never saw a lion.
uh
So
so you bring up social media, it does do good of getting the message out there, people trying to find ways to help, save the parks and save some public land. But in a sense, is there a way for social media and TikTok to have a adverse effect on our public lands? Like, is if there's a trending video of this one waterfall at the Grand Canyon, then everybody wants to go there. Is that an issue that we're seeing too now?
totally. Uh, I think social media has, the downside is it has this tendency to make us love places to death. And I think it's important if you do social media, don't do it just for to follow in other people's footsteps. Find your own stuff, your own content, and don't be a just a tour guide. That's my opinion. I don't post exact locations of where I took stuff. Some places are obvious because they've already been done, and I try to do it in a different way. But I think it's important to find stories that are unique instead of kind of regurgitating stuff that's been done. And there'll be times you want to go see you know, that amazing waterfall. Great. Try to do it in a little different way and maybe don't like broadcast that you got to go here. Be mindful, be thoughtful, like think about ways to do it. And for instance, Kevin and I never published the route we took walking through 800 miles through the length of the Grand Canyon intentionally. We came across 4,000-year-old polychrome ancient Puebloan rock art. That's art that has been painted on the walls of the canyon 4,000 years ago. Some say maybe 10,000 years ago. They're still there. We never disclose where those are for this exact reason, because we want to protect them and not have people show up and sprawl their name all over it, which I've also seen tragically. Um, so uh, yeah, just a word to your audience, like go out and connect and find the awe and wonder of these places. Be respectful and mindful of leaving no trace, no impact. Thinking about the next people that may come, and if you're using social media, think on ways to do it that's unique to you. And then if it's about an important cause, sure, great, jump on board there. But yeah, just be mindful.
And this question, I mean, I think people get these two words kind of thinking they're the same thing, but they are different. And just, is it conservation or preservation? Which one should we be focused on doing right now?
I think preservation is kind of the old school where we preserve it, never touch it, and keep humans out. There's too many of us on this planet. So conservation is where we're part of the picture and we go into these places, but we protect them with management as best we can. And so we're in that model more. Preservation is protected, never go in it, and remove the humans. Um, that sounds romantic and great in certain areas, especially for very critically endangered species, maybe like the snow leopard. But there's a lot of humans on this planet, and it's going to be difficult to do that model. So conservation includes us in the picture, and hopefully in a way that is more helpful than harmful.
And don't want to take too much more of your time, but I just wanted to ask two more questions here if you have time. Is that
Yeah, we'll
okay?
do two quickies, and then I got to
Okay.
roll.
No, I appreciate you doing this for me.
No sweat.
Uh,
Happy to help.
so just what's kind of next? What's the next is with the Colorado River, that story you're telling, what's the next step in preserving that or even just trying to get the message out there? Because that photo, I remember seeing that on National Geographic, the overhead one you have where the boat is like out in the middle, it looks like a desert. And that's where the river used to meet the ocean, was
Yep.
so powerful. So just what's the next step for that side now?
Uh, Good question. I'm doing a documentary about telling the story of my dad. He was the pilot for a lot of the aerial images I did, and now I fly, and I'm gonna hopefully get him up in the plane. Sort of a story of handing generation to generation, and caring for places. So working on that, and then I did a book years ago on silence, the value of silence in nature and natural sounds, like concept of like bat wings and hearing wildlife, not void of sound, but void of mechanical sound. And so I'm doing a new version of that for as a kid's book, trying to get the youngsters kind of the I think we're shooting for the 10 to 12, 10 to 13 age group, maybe a little older. So I'm repurposing some of my photos and some of my writing kind of in that frame, like sort of the adventure fun, but then don't forget the the importance of learning to listen and, of course, get away from our screens. We can't. We're all kind of addicted to these things, teenagers or adults. We need to get off them and put them down and go learn from the best teacher out there, which is Mother Nature, in my opinion.
And then anything you want the listeners to go check out, anything they need to go follow you on, or be aware of here coming up, in the Pete McBride world.
Uh, I have a website that I don't update that often, but that's just my name, PeteMcBride.com. They can see other stuff there. And I guess Instagram, I do post there when I'm engaging, when I'm not trying to get away from social media. But that's Pedro McBride. I had a grandfather who is Guatemalan. That's where the Pedro comes from. Um, and so I try to keep stuff flowing there. And yeah, that's about it. I have a short documentary called Monumental Moment, which just premiered at a film fest this spring, but I'll be posting about that where that comes. That's about that young Native American woman who's younger than you and doing remarkable, making waves, which is cool.
Very cool.
So
Well,
I just
thank
want to say congrats to you for doing the podcast. I think it's great to see your generation kind of stepping up and trying new things, and good luck with it.
No, I appreciate you so much for doing this for me. Meant a lot, and I know you have a busy schedule, so for you to be able to take time out of your busy schedule to do this meant a lot. I appreciate it.
Happy to help. Enjoy. Where are you again? You're in Iowa?
Iowa. Yep, Des Moines.
Yep.
Not a lot of mountains here.
Yeah, so enjoy the corn around you in your area,
Oh
or
yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah.
Definitely.
Well,
Yep.
I hope the corn's growing well, and keep me posted on when this comes out, and we'll stay in touch. If you ever got questions, holler.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, you have a great weekend. Have a great July 4th too, and we'll stay in touch. A huge thank you to Pete McBride. Again, I know I was annoying him throughout these months of just constantly messaging him, trying to get him on the show. He never made me feel like I was annoying him. So I greatly appreciate him finding time in his busy schedule to come on the show here today, and great stuff about his career, about what threats public lands and national parks are facing. I learned a lot. It was a great time with Pete McBride, and I truly appreciate it. Go follow him on all of his social media pages, and make sure to go support our public lands and national parks. But before we wrap up today's show, I need to give a shout out to our guys at Stevens Automotive and Sales, 5320 Northwest Beaver Drive in Johnston, Iowa. Going to be heading there actually earlier, probably tomorrow morning, to go say hi to all of them and also make sure my car's ready to go for Missouri. We're going to basically trust them with anything with our cars, and that's what you guys should do as well. Stevens Automotive, they've been there for 35 years. They're loyal people. They're true Iowans. You also have people that are going to communicate effectively. They're going to make sure you are aware of what's going on with your car. And then finally, and probably one of the biggest reasons I always like going to Stevens Automotive, no BS. They are going to tell it to you like it is, and they're not going to upcharge you for dumb stuff. Like sometimes you get screwed over by some other places. Not at Stevens Automotive and Sales. They're true people. 35 years of family owned and operated. 5320 Northwest Beaver Drive in Johnston, Iowa. When you go to Stevens Automotive, make sure to let them know that Media Row sent you. So again, thank you to Pete McBride. Thank you all for liking, subscribing, commenting, all that great stuff. Keep it coming. Send us your photos. Tag us if you go to Kelly's Little Nipper at Media Row Pod on Twitter. Just keep it going. Keep going to Stevens. Keep going to Kelly's Little Nipper. Keep supporting Media Row. We all appreciate it. And a final show of this week is going to be a little different as well, but it's going to be a fun one. I'm going to bring in my brother on Wednesday, and we're going to recap one of the craziest things we've ever done. And it's still one of those moments. It's been 2 years since it happened, since we did this crazy thing. I'm not spoiling it until you listen on Wednesday. We still text each other of like, I can't believe X happened. I can't believe we did that. So, and if you listen to KXNO, you may be thinking, you may be knowing what I'm talking about here if you're listening a few years ago when I was on the morning show. But really happy to have him on. So make sure to listen on Wednesday for a new edition of the Media Row podcast.